I want to clarify a couple things. I know a lot of my students have said, hey, if you're going to have a Ferrari, you have to have the Ferrari in red. And for me, it doesn't have to be in red. I do agree with that sentiment, though. Usually sports cars, they're red and it's very neat and great. But I'll take it in any color. Green, yellow, blue, purple even. But that's not the point of this video. Let's get into what I want to talk about this video, which is casting. Here on the screen I have variables x and y, and what I'm doing is I have a 3.14, which is pi, and that is a float, and I'm casting it over to an int. What does casting mean? Well, that means taking one type and converting it over to another type. So in this particular line, line 1, what we're doing is we're taking x and we're making it a type integer. So now it is 3. It's going to drop to 0.14 and just contain 3. Similarly, in line number 2, we have y and we have the string 42. This is something to pay attention to. String 42 and 42 without the string, even though it looks similar, they're completely different. One being a string with the quotes and the other one being an integer. In this case, we have an integer and we're going to cast it over to an int. Now I'm going to do this for the rest of this video with these variables, but let's prove it to ourselves. Otherwise, I don't know if you'll believe me. So let's print the ID of x. The type. And let's print the type of a different row here, and we'll print the type of y. And if we run this and we save it, we'll see that we have two integers, right? Integer 1 and integer 2, even though one was a float and the other one was a string. So if we continue doing this, I just want to make sure that you see the pattern here. So we have 5, which is an integer, and we want to make it over to a float, a type of float. So we're going to cast it to a float. What does that mean? It should be 5.0, even though it doesn't. That's what it is, an integer by default. If it doesn't have a decimal, it is 0.0, of course. And here what we're going to do is we're going to do 3.14, which is a string, and cast it over to a float. So if we do the same thing here, if we do the same thing, which is print type of apple, and we're going to do the same thing here with banana, just to save some typing. We run it and we save it. What do we get? We get a float and a float. That's exactly what we had here, even though it was an integer to begin with, and then it was a string to begin with. So if we continue on, we'll see that 42 here is an integer, and we want to cast it over to a string. So if we do something like this, where we say, hey, show me the type of text rather. What is that? Well, we get a string, and if you really want to print what it is, by the way, you could do this, and you could see it. I've been avoiding doing that, but you could see that it is 42, and then the class string, right? So just something to keep in mind. And what else? Let's continue on here. So we have a list, a tuple, and a set. This is showing how we can cast a string over to a list over to a tuple, a list over to a set. Now these are collections, and if you haven't covered collections yet, please look at my video on collections so that you can understand what are the differences between the list, a tuple, and a set. But just for casting purposes, to cover the whole casting information, let's just go through this and understand that this is a string, and it'll be casted to some collection, being a list. We know a collection of a list is really an array, or just a list of things, sort of like how we go grocery shopping. We have a list of things that we want to buy, like milk, eggs, bread, etc. Well, here we have a list of characters which come from the string. So instead of a string, we have a list of characters, and that's by definition what a string is, right? It's a list of characters, right? But we have it in this format when we make it to a list. A tuple, again, we have a list, and we're going to create it into a tuple. A tuple is with the parentheses, and means that we cannot have elements that are modified. And again, take a look at my video on that, and it will make more sense. Anyway, we take a list and we created a tuple. Here we have a list and we created a set. Very similarly, we define or depict sets by the curly brace. So there's more to collections that I'm not covering that here, but we also know that curly braces could define a dictionary. So definitely look at the collections video. So that's that. I'm not even going to print out the type of my list and the type of my tuple and the type of my set. I think you believe me. Lastly, I'm going to talk about bool, which is creating or casting to a Boolean type, which is true or false. So 42 will be true and 0 would be false. This leads me to the discussion about truthy and falsy values, which we're going to talk in the next video.